Section 4 of On Benefits. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Shreya Sethi. On Benefits by Seneca. Translated by Aubrey Stewart. Book 2, Chapters 9 to 17. Accordingly, all writers on ethical philosophy tell us that some benefits ought to be given in secret, others in public. Those things which it is glorious to receive, such as military decorations or public offices, and whatever else gains in value the more widely it is known, should be conferred in public. On the other hand, when they do not promote a man or add to his social standing, but help him when in weakness, in want, or in disgrace, they should be given silently and so as to be known only to those who profit by it. Sometimes even the person who is assisted must be deceived in order that he may receive our bounty without knowing the source from whence it flows. It is said that Arcesilaus had a friend who was poor, but concealed his poverty, who was ill, yet tried to hide his disorder, and who had not money for the necessary expenses of existence. Without his knowledge, Arcesilaus placed a bag of money under his pillow, in order that this victim of false shame might rather seem to find what he wanted than to receive. What, say you, ought he not to know from whom he received? Yes, let him not know it at first. If it be essential to your kindness that he should not, afterwards I will do so much for him and give him so much that he will perceive who was the giver of the former benefit. Or better still, let him not know that he has received anything, provided I know that I have given it. This, you say, is to get too little return for one's goodness. True, if it be an investment of which you are thinking, but if a gift, it should be given in the way which will be of most service to the receiver. You should be satisfied with the approval of your conscience. If not, you do not really delight in doing good, but in being seen to do good. For all that, you say, I wish him to know it. Is it a debtor that you seek for? For all that, I wish him to know it. What? Though it may be more useful, more creditable, more pleasant for him not to know his benefactor, will you not consent to stand aside? I wish him to know. So then you would not save a man's life in the dark. I do not enjoy that, whenever the matter admits of it. One ought to take into consideration the pleasure which we receive from the joy of the receiver of our kindness. But if he ought to have help and is ashamed to receive it, if what we bestow upon him pains him unless it be concealed, I forbear to make my benefits public. Why should I not refrain from hinting at my having given him anything, when the first and most essential rule is never to reproach a man with what you have done for him, and not even to remind him of it? The rule for the giver and receiver of a benefit is that the one should straightway forget that he has given, the other should never forget that he has received it. A constant reference to one's own services wounds our friend's feelings, like the man who was saved from the proscription under the triumvirate by one of Caesar's friends, and afterwards found it impossible to endure his preserver's arrogance. They wished to cry, "Give me back to Caesar." How long will you go on saying, "I saved you, I snatched you from the jaws of death"? This is indeed life, if I remember it on my own will, but death if I remember it at yours. I owe you nothing if you saved me merely in order to have some one to point at. How long do you mean to lead me about? How long do you mean to forbid me to forget my adventure? If I had been a defeated enemy, I should have been led in triumph but once. We ought not to speak of the benefits which we have conferred. To remind men of them is to ask them to return them. We should not obtrude them or recall the memory of them. You should only remind a man of what you have given him by giving him something else. We ought not even to tell others of our good deeds. He who confers a benefit should be silent. It should be told by the receiver, for otherwise you may receive the retort which was made to one who was everywhere boasting of the benefit he had conferred. "You will not deny," said his victim, "that you have received a return for it?" "When?" asked he. "Often," said the other, "and in many places, that is, wherever and whenever you have told the story. What need is there for you to speak, and to take the place which belongs to another? There is a man who can tell the story in a way much more to your credit, and thus you will gain glory for not telling it yourself. You would think me ungrateful if through your own silence no one is to know of your benefit. So far from doing this, even if anyone tells the story in our presence, we ought to make answer. He does indeed deserve much more than this, and I am aware that I have not hitherto done any great things for him, although I wish to do so. This should not be said jokingly, nor yet with that air by which some persons repel those whom they especially wish to attract. In addition to this, we ought to act with the greatest politeness towards such persons. If the farmer ceases his labours after he has put in the seed, he will lose what he has sown. It is only by great pains that seeds are brought to yield a crop. No plant will bear fruit unless it is tended with equal care from first to last. And the same rule is true of benefits. Can any benefits be greater than those which children receive from their parents? Yet these benefits are useless if they be deserted while young. If the pious care of the parents does not for a long time watch over the gift which they have bestowed, so it is with other benefits. Unless you help them, you will lose them. To give is not enough. You must foster what you have given. If you wish those whom you lay under an obligation to be grateful to you, you must not merely confer benefits upon them, but you must also love them. Above all, as I said before, spare their ears. You will weary them if you remind them of your goodness. If you reproach them with it, you will make them hate you. Pride ought above all things be avoided when you confer a benefit. What need have you for disdainful airs or swelling phrases? The act itself will exalt you. Let us shun vain boasting. Let us be silent and let our deeds speak for us. A benefit conferred with haughtiness not only wins no gratitude but also dislike. Caius Caesar granted Pompeius Penus his life, that is, if not to take away life to be granted. Then, when Pompeius was set free and returning thanks to him, he stretched out his left foot to be kissed. Those who excuse this action and say that it was not done through arrogance, say that he wished to show him a gilded, nay, a golden slipper studded with pearls. Well, say they, what disgrace can there be in a man of consular rank kissing gold and pearls? And what part of Caesar's whole body was it less illusion to kiss? So, then, that man, the object of whose life was to change a free state into a Persian despotism, was not satisfied when a senator, an aged man, a man who had filled the highest offices in the state, prostrated himself before him in the presence of all the nobles, just as the vanquished prostrate themselves before their conqueror. He discovered a place below his knees down to which he might thrust liberty. What is this but trampling upon the commonwealth, and that too with the left foot? Though you may say that this point does not signify, it was not a sufficiently foul and frantic outrage for the emperor to sit at the trial of a consular for his life wearing slippers. He must needs push his shoes into a senator's face? O pride, the silliest fault of great good fortune! How pleasant it is to take nothing from thee! How dost thou turn all benefits into outrages! How dost thou delight in all excess! How ill all things become thee! The higher thou risest, the lower thou art, and provest that the good things by which thou art so puffed up profit thee not. Thou spoilest all that thou givest. It is worth while to inquire why it is that pride thus wagers and changes the form and appearance of a countenance. so that she prefers a mask to her own face. It is pleasant to receive gifts when they are conferred in a kindly and gentle manner. When a superior is giving them, does not exalt himself over me, but shows as much good feeling as possible, placing himself on a level with me, giving without parade and choosing a time when I am glad of his help, rather than waiting till I am in the bitterest need. The only way by which you can prevail upon proud men not to spoil their gifts by their arrogance is by proving to them that benefits do not appear greater because they are bestowed with great pomp and circumstance, that no one will think them greater men for doing so, and that excess pride is a mere delusion which leads men to hate even what they ought to love. There are some things which injure those who receive them, things which it is not a benefit to give but to withhold. We should therefore consider the usefulness of our gift rather than the wish of the petitioner to receive it, for we often long for hurtful things and are unable to discern how ruinous they are because our judgment is biased by our feelings. When, however, the longing is past, when that frenzied impulse which masters our good sense has passed away, we abhor those who have given us hurtful gifts. As we refuse cold water to the sick, or swords to the grief-stricken or remorseful, and take from the insane whatever they might in their delirium use to their own destruction, so must we persist in refusing to give anything whatever that is harmful, although our friends earnestly and humbly, nay, sometimes even most piteously beg for it. We ought to look at the end of our benefits as well as the beginning, and not merely to give what men are glad to receive, but what they will hereafter be glad to have received. There are many who say, I know that this will do him no good, but what am I to do? He begs for it. I cannot withstand his entreaties. Let me see to it. He will blame himself, not me. Not so, you. He will blame, and deservedly. When he comes to his right mind, when the frenzy which now excites him has left him, how can he help hating the man who has assisted him to harm and to endanger himself? It is a cruel kindness to allow one's self to be won over into granting that which injures those who beg for it, just as it is the noblest of acts to save men from harm against their will. So it is but hatred under the mask of civility to grant what is harmful to those who ask for it. Let us confer benefits of such a kind that the more they are made use of, the better they please, and which can never turn into injuries. I never will give money to a man if I know that he will pay it to an adulteress, nor will I be found in connection with any wicked act or plan. If possible, I will restrain men from crime; if not, at least I will never assist them in it. Whether my friend be driven into doing wrong by anger, or seduced from the path of safety by the heat of ambition, he shall never gain the means of doing mischief except from himself. Nor will I enable him one day to say, he ruined me out of love for me. Our friends often give us what our enemies wish us to receive. We are driven by the unseasonable fondness of the former into the ruin which the latter hopes will befall us. Yet, often as it is the case, what can be more shameful than that there should be no difference between a benefit and hatred? Let us never bestow gifts which may recoil upon us to our shame. As the sum total of friendship consists in making our friends equal to ourselves, we ought to consider the interests of both parties. I must give to him that wants, yet so that I do not want myself. I must help him who is perishing, and yet so that I do not perish myself, unless by doing so I can save a great man or a great cause. I must give no benefit which it would disgrace me to ask for. I ought not to make a small benefit appear a great one, nor allow great benefits to be regarded as small. For although it destroys all feeling of gratitude to treat what you give like a creditor, yet you do not reproach a man, but merely set off your gift to the best advantage by letting him know that it is worth. Every man must consider what his resources and powers are, so that we may not give either more or less than we are able. We must also consider the character and position of the person to whom we give. For some men are too great to give small gifts, while others are too small to receive great ones. Compare, therefore, the character both of the giver and the receiver, and weigh that which you give between the two, taking care that what is given to be neither too burdensome nor too trivial for the one to give, nor yet such as the receiver will either treat with disdain as too small or think too great for him to deal with. Alexander, who was of unsound mind and always full of magnificent ideas, presented somebody with a city. When the man to whom he gave it had reflected upon the scope of his own powers, he wished to avoid the jealousy which so great a present would excite, saying that the gift did not suit a man of his position. "I do not ask," replied Alexander, "what is becoming for you to receive, but what is becoming for me to give." This seems a spirited and kingly speech, yet really it is a most foolish one. Nothing is by itself a becoming gift for anyone. All depends upon who gives it, to whom he gives it, when and for what reason, where, and so forth, without which details it is impossible to argue about it. Inflated creature! If it did not become him to receive this gift, it could not become thee to give it. There should be a proportion between men's characters and the offices which they fill, and as virtue in all cases should be our measure, he who gives too much acts as wrongly as he who gives too little. Even granting that fortune has raised you so high that where other men give cups, you give cities, which it would show a greater mind in you than to take and squander, still there must be some of your friends who are not strong enough to put a city in their pockets. A certain cynic asked Antigonus for a talent. Antigonus answered that this was too much for a cynic to ask for. After this rebuff, he asked for a penny. Antigonus answered that this was too little for a king to give. This kind of hair-splitting, you say, is contemptible. He found the means of giving neither. In the matter of the penny he thought of the king, in that of the talent he thought of the cynic. Whereas with respect to the cynic it would have been right to receive the penny, with respect to the king it would have been right to give the talent. Though there may be things which are too great for a cynic to receive, yet nothing is so small that it does not become a gracious king to bestow it. If you ask me, I applaud Antigonus, for it is not to be endured that a man who despises money should ask for it. Your cynic has publicly proclaimed that his hatred of money and assumed the character of one who despises it. Let him act up to his professions. It is most inconsistent for him to earn money by glorifying his poverty. I wish to use Chrysippus's simile of the game of ball, in which the ball must certainly fall by the fault either of the thrower or of the catcher. It only holds its course when it passes between the hands of two persons who each throw it and catch it suitably. It is necessary, however, for a good player to send the ball in one way to a comrade at a long distance, and in another to one at a short distance. So it is with a benefit. Unless it be suitable both for the giver and the receiver, it will neither leave the one nor reach the other as it ought. If we have to do with a practised and skilled player, we shall throw the ball more recklessly, for however it may come, that quick and agile hand will send it back again. If we are playing with an unskilled novice, we shall not throw it so hard, but far more gently, guiding it straight into his very hands, and we shall run to meet it when it returns to us. This is just what we ought to do in conferring benefits. Let us teach some men how to do so, and be satisfied if they attempt it, if they have the courage and the will to do so. For the most part, however, we make men ungrateful and encourage them to be so, as if our benefits were only great when we cannot receive any gratitude for them. Just as some spiteful ball-players purposely put out their companion, of course to the ruin of the game, which cannot be carried on without entire agreement. Many men are of so depraved a nature that they had rather lose the presents which they make than be thought to have received a return for them, because they are proud and like to lay people under obligations. Yet how much better and more kindly would it be if they tried to enable the others also to perform their parts, if they encouraged them in returning gratitude, put the best construction upon all their acts, received one who wished to thank them just as cordially as if he came to repay what he had received, and easily lent themselves to the belief that those whom they have laid under an obligation wish to repay it. We blame usurers equally when they press hardly for payment and when they delay and make difficulties about taking back the money which they have lent. In the same way, it is just as right that a benefit should be returned as it is wrong to ask anyone to return it. The best man is he who gives readily, never asks for any return, and is delighted when the return is made, because having really and truly forgotten what he gave, he receives it as though it were a present. End of section 4. Recording by Shreya Sethi.